welcome to Sid Caudle in these difficult days, Sid. And lots going to happen this week, but we'll let it happen and then we can comment on it. But it's not good. And when the local elections results, well, I think they were actually worse than Labour expected, weren't they?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they actually lost 60% of the seats that they held prior to the elections, but they still managed to win over 1,000 seats, which, quite honestly, from my perspective, you see how, in my view, appallingly bad this government is. I'm surprised they won over 1,000 seats, but I think you do have to take into consideration that most of these seats were being fought in the inner cities. So, it was the whole of London plus a lot of other cities that they were fighting. So they were seats which would be normally, in normal times, natural Labour seats. It wasn't like last year when we were fighting county councils that were more naturally Conservative seats. So it's not that surprising that the Labour Party still managed to win 1,000 seats despite being so unpopular. But yeah, they did lose 1,500 seats, so they did lose 60% of the seats which they held prior to the election. So it was a terrible day for for the Labour Party, and in some areas it was just devastating. I mean, there was one seat near me where they got 50% of the vote last time, and this time they got 7%. And in Wigan, for instance, even though it was only one third of the seats being fought, Reform actually won every single one of the seats on the council. But Labour still hold the council because it was only one third of the seats that came up. But if the whole council had been up for grabs, then Reform would have won every single seat on the council. I mean, so yes, there were examples. And by the way, when the BBC did the report, they sort of said, "Oh, how many councils still held by Labour?" So, it didn't give the full picture because in some councils like Wigan, as I just mentioned, if the whole council had been up for election, then Labour would have completely lost it. But because it was only one third of the council, they still held the council, even though they did appallingly badly in the election.
Well, there's a lot of shenanigans going on. And if one looks at it in a bit more detail, you've got bizarre areas, Birmingham, Wales, Scotland. And out of this comes the change of the independence. Now, independence used to be, well, you can be any party or none. You were independent. But now there's a substitute for the word independent, and that substitute is Muslim.
Well, yes, I mean, there are, of course, independents standing that are genuine independents, but yeah, there is a Muslim faction that are standing as independents and are winning seats, and that certainly happened in Birmingham, where they've actually got some members of parliament. The result in Birmingham was incredibly diverse. I mean, Reform won some seats. I think, I think Reform won more seats than any other party, but it was still only less than a third of the seats on the council. And when you look at it overall, if you put Labour and the Independents and the Greens and Liberal Democrats together, they'll probably be running the council, I expect, although there'll be some negotiations, no doubt. But Reform and the Conservatives together, although they've got a lot of seats, they haven't got enough to run the council.
Well, let's look at this in more detail, particularly Birmingham, Sid, because it's representative, maybe, of the future. The
Mm.
figures as follows, a couple out of that, but it's not affected it really. Um, Labour Party, 17 councillors, Green Party, 19, Conservative, 16, Lib Dems, 12, Independents, 13, not to be surprised in Birmingham, and it's gone sectarian.
You haven't mentioned Reform. Reform also got some.
22 seats, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, so they actually got more seats than anybody else, even though, like you say, it was totally fractured.
But is this the future, Sid? Because you've got a six-party estate there. It's not Conservative and Labour anymore. There's six parties. And who's going to deal with who regarding getting in a majority? I mean, it's bad enough seeing the bins on the streets still in Birmingham. They're going to be there forever.
Well, yes, and it, a lot will depend on the actual people involved that are sitting on the council, whether they are people that are friendly, cooperative, people that you can work with, or and willing to negotiate and willing to put the city and the welfare of the city, as their first priority. Because if they are, then I think you'll find that the Greens, the Lib Dems, the Independents, the Labour Party will all get together and run the city, and they should be able to run it effectively. If they're arrogant people that are only interested in their own agenda and not interested in the welfare of the city, then you've got no chance, frankly. And because the Reform and the Conservatives, although they may be very good, they obviously can't command a majority. I think it's unlikely the Lib Dems would work with them, and it's certainly almost impossible for any other party to work with them. So we'll have to wait and see what comes of it. But it's absolutely vital, frankly, that all these councillors, whoever they are, whatever party they represent, put the city first. If they don't, then the city will be in a complete mess.
Going on from that a little bit, we've got, and I'm going to read you, Professor Travers has commented on the Birmingham, and it will be many other cities, and outside cities indeed, problems in the future. He said, there's clearly sectarianism here and there. There's no doubt that people are electing parties based on national and international issues, which have nothing to do with potholes, social care, street lighting, which is what local elections should be about. Now, got to be honest, that I've been banging on for centuries about this. And yeah, I know you've got an answer, but what's it got to do with anything else but local issues? These are local people voting for local issues. It shouldn't be anything to do with politics, should it?
Um, well, I think honestly it should be primarily about financial management. I don't think it should be just about potholes. Potholes are a problem everywhere, frankly. I mean, what happens is that the frost gets into the road and potholes appear. And there's nothing much the council can do to stop them appearing. Obviously, they can spend money filling them, and most councils are spending money filling them. But, it's a bit stupid to be voting on potholes, frankly. But they should be voting on financial management. And, is the council effectively managing the finances that they got? Are they prioritising the services? Are they doing things that are in the best interest of the city? That's what they should be voting on. And Birmingham has been a complete disaster. I mean, they've got themselves into a total financial mess. And because they got themselves in a total financial mess, they're not able to provide basic services like refuse collection, which I mean, so Labour on local issues deserve to be voted out. But yes, you're quite right. Far too many people have been voting on national issues, and I think it was evident when, for instance, the new mayor of Hackney, who is a Green councillor, in her acceptance speech started talking about genocide in Gaza, which frankly is an anti-Semitic trope. And she should be utterly ashamed of herself. I mean, if they've got a mayor now in Hackney who is going to be talking about genocide in Gaza, then frankly, we've got no chance for Hackney being run efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, it's a nonsense, isn't it? And their salary is £77,000 a year for somebody
Mm,
like that.
mm,
Beggars belief. No wonder the
mm.
rest of the world, and they are, saying what has happened to Britain. They're laughing at us on
Yes.
a national, a local, and of course on an international basis. Which brings us to something we have mentioned in the past. It's the Straits of Hormuz and what's going to happen there. Intransigence springs to mind. Both America and Iran are playing hardball. The skirmishes the whole time, Sid. But the underlying thing is people are making a lot of money out of this, as they did indeed with COVID. Now, look at it whichever way you can. We get 20% less oil delivered to the world, which is a fifth. It's significant, but it's not 20%. The two oil pipelines are now going for it across to the Red Sea, and it's only 10%. Now, in any business, that should be doable, Sid. This has been over egged.
Well, it does seem to be a problem with jet fuel, interestingly enough, which I don't quite understand. But people are saying that the problems with the Straits of Hormuz basically means that there's not enough fuel now to fly planes. And I know people are literally saying that my flight has been cancelled, or they're trying to make sure that every flight is full up, and they're only flying flights where, where absolutely necessary. So this appears to be now an international issue in jet fuel. I think the price of petrol at the pump is gone up, but that's certainly manageable, and I think it's likely to come down again. But I don't know personally why it's a problem, but it is a problem.
To illustrate, maybe a bit of help here is fertilizers are desperately important.
Mm,
And why they've had a bad time is you can't suddenly make it out of crude oil.
mm,
You've got to have it from petroleum gas,
mm,
and that has been more affected. So you can see the problem there.
mm. Yes, I mean, there are clearly some problems with the Strait of Hormuz being closed, and but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, to be quite honest with you, in my opinion, we're going to start seeing a solution to this in the near future. I think probably in the next month or two. I don't think it's just going to carry on ad infinitum, but we'll have to wait and see. One of the problems, of course, is that the United States and Israel have killed a lot of the leadership in Iran. And having killed the leadership, they've now got a problem as to who is in charge. And it seems as though there's a battle for power going on in Iran between the Revolutionary Guards and the more moderate politicians. And the Revolutionary Guards obviously have got a major say and have got a lot of power. And they're not going to let the moderate politicians just make an agreement with the United States that would be in the for the benefit of the country. That basically is the problem we're facing now. So we'll have to wait and see who actually wins this battle for power.
We have some regular programs now going out to the States since our partnership with the leading magazine, George Magazine, there. And I took a chance the other day, having mused a bit about what is really happening there, because the Americans still cannot understand why Europe are so reticent to join the party. It's in everybody's interest to stop the nuclear weapons. Even the king thinks that. Now, that being the case, why? Because nobody has answered that question. And dare I suggest, I gave an answer the other day. We're frightened to death. What are we frightened of? Well, we're frightened of the 2,500-mile range of their new missiles. We always thought it was under 1,000 miles, but it's 2.5, which brings the whole of Europe into play.
Mm.
And Sid, we have not got the Patriot defense system, the dome, like Israel have, like America are building. We're in the front line. We daren't say boo to a goose. We certainly daren't say boo to Iran. That's the reason we're not joining the party.
Yes, you may be right. And by the way, on that issue, we've been saying since the 2015 general election what we need is a missile shield. And rather than spending 48 billion updating Trident, which frankly we're very unlikely ever to use, we desperately need missile defense. And we should be spending money on missile defense now. We were saying that in the 2015 general election over 10 years ago. And it's very interesting that what we were saying then is now being proved absolutely right. And this is what I say when I say the Christian People's Alliance has got the best manifesto. We've been proven correct on issue after issue time later where people haven't taken any notice of what we've been saying. But I don't think that the only issue, frankly, in Europe is because they're worried about Iran possibly shooting missiles at them. There's something else that's going on, and that is the Muslim vote. And because of the increased number of Muslims through immigration that have affected right across Europe, I mean, it's not only Britain, I mean, it's also very evident in Germany, for instance, where they've had a massive invasion from Turks in Germany, that the Muslims now are a very big proportion of the vote in Turkey. And Muslims have got no problem rigging votes, by the way. I mean, because they don't actually believe in democracy. So they're happy to use the democratic system in order to achieve power. And we're seeing it clearly in the UK because obviously the Greens have now given up completely to Islam. And there's the independents, like you say, that are standing and winning a lot of seats and a lot of power, and they're now talking about working with the Greens to presumably then win more seats in the first past the post system. The Labour Party, who used to get enormous number of votes from Muslims, have lost the Muslim vote completely, largely over Gaza. And now they're desperate to try and win back the Muslim vote. So they're prepared to do whatever they can to win back the Muslim vote. And that is why, frankly, Keir Starmer did not support Trump over Iran, because he knew that all the Muslims would be up in arms against him. And I don't think it was because he was afraid of Iran attacking Britain. I think it was because he was afraid of completely losing the Muslim vote permanently.
Got that present anyway, hasn't he?
Mm.
Well, whether it's permanent, time will tell. This is an important week for the aforementioned Prime Minister, and something's come out really in the open at last. And that's basically what surrounded the Tavistock Clinic, which was mainly transitioning young people to whatever sex they felt they were in at the particular time. And we have the report, which came down firmly and said, no, it's absolute nonsense what's going out. But it's got back in, Sid. And it's got back in very cleverly because there appears to be a loophole in everything. And Sir Keir Starmer's very good at loopholes. And apparently the loophole was that for scientific purposes and for experimental purposes and for knowing what we should do in the future, we can still rely, count on, perform a number of experiments. The Tavistock Clinic is back in business of binding breasts, of forcing all sorts of things into children to increase their hormonal count and change them into whatever they want to be. And the horrible thing is that when this is being got into court, which it is by Citizen Go, then the government, when you walk into court, has got 12 lawyers, barristers, to put this case through. And on the other side, Citizen Go has got one barrister. And the whole thing is being kicked into the legal long grass, time after time, and things are delayed so that this can carry on. Now, I put it to you, Sid, we often say this is evil. Can we say, knowing what's really going on, we have an illegal, evil government that deserves everything it's about to get?
Yes. And I'm fully aware of what you're saying, and I know that what you're saying is absolutely right. We have, of course, had a Supreme Court ruling that said a man is how they were born. They're not, it's not what they say they are. And a woman is how they were born. So a birth man is not allowed to use a woman's lavatory. And but it was very interesting. I talked earlier about Zoe, this woman who's now been elected mayor of Hackney, and I talked about what she said about Gaza. But she also, in her speech, talked about um, trans rights, and she said she was going to defy the law that was passed by the Supreme Court, or the judgment that was passed by the Supreme Court that said that a woman has to be a birth woman and a man has to be a birth man. She said she was going to defy that law as the new mayor of Hackney. Now, I find that very, very interesting because what are the police going to do? I mean, are the police going to arrest her for defying the law? I mean, are they actually going to implement it, or are they just going to turn a blind eye to her defying the law? I mean, or will we actually possibly have some sort of civil case brought against her for defying the law? It's very interesting because, I mean, this is an interesting lesson, by the way, for Christians, because one of the things I find is that Christians don't appear to have the same passion as, in her case, a New Age adherent, or in other cases, in the cases of Muslims, because we've had prayer banned outside abortion centres. And we've had isolated cases of people who've been willing to oppose that ban and pray silently and really show how ridiculous the ban is. But I think, frankly, we should have mass disobedience. I think, Christians should be able to rise up in their thousands and say, we are not going to obey this law. But unfortunately, right from the word go, and because I talked about this, when the law was first introduced and said we need to defy this law. And other people who were actually doing the vigils said, no, 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 we're not going to defy it. We're going to obey the law and we're going to move our vigils to beyond 150 yards, whatever it is, out away from the abortion centre. We're not, there's no way we're going to defy the law. So that was the decision, basically, for people running the vigils. So there's very little that I could do to actually say, sorry, this law is wrong. But you know, it really does come down to the police. It comes down to the prosecution service, as to whether the law is going to be properly enforced, and that is the case here, I'm afraid.
Golly, Sid, you're a revolutionary. Let's go even farther. And there's another march organised by Tommy Robinson that's going to happen on the 16th of this month. Now, there are four speakers that have been banned. And looking at the four speakers, there's nothing exceptional why they should be banned. But the Home Secretary said, well, it could cause a disturbance if they came in the country. Never mind the disturbances that the opposition, i.e., in the mosques, who are preaching hate speech within the mosque and sometimes outside the mosque, they're not banned. Well, that's not strictly true. One or two have been in extreme circumstances, but nothing to like what is going there. They seem to have got a downer on Tommy Robinson every move he makes. The last march was peaceful and poignant. What are they trying to get up to here?
Well, they have, of course, banned Palestine Action. And again, you see, what I was talking about just now. I mean, there's a lot of people that have decided that they wanted to defy that ban. And the result of that, and I've seen it myself, I was in Parliament Square where they were actually trying to do a Palestine Action demonstration, and there were literally hundreds of police who were arresting people. But then what do the courts do? You know, these people turn up in court. You know, they've been demonstrating for Palestine Action contrary to the ban, and the courts say, you know, you shouldn't do that. You know, but we're not going to put you in prison or anything. We're not going to fine you. You know, we're just going to tell you off. So the courts take no action. So this is the problem. So the ban, if the police take no action, it's impossible to enforce. But as far as Tommy Robinson is concerned, they've highlighted him as one individual, and they just keep arresting him. And quite honestly, Tommy Robinson says he's become a Christian, and I believe him. Unfortunately, he's clearly got violence in his past. And that is what the police latch onto. They see him as a trigger for violence, and they think wherever he goes, he's going to cause violence. So they think if they can arrest him and stick him in prison, then that will stop violence from other people. And that's their approach and that's their attitude. And frankly, I think it's wrong, frankly, totally wrong. They shouldn't just be working on his reputation. They should be working on his actions. And there's a long time since Tommy Robinson himself has actually been involved in any sort of mass violence.
You're safer in the United Kingdom being a thief, of course, because you can go and get out of jail card free up to £200 by shoplifting. We are in strange times, Sid.
Yeah, absolutely. See, this is where our policy of working with people when they come out of prison to reduce reoffending is, if it was actually put in place, would have a dramatic effect. Because, Christian charities have proved that they can reduce crime reduce reoffending from over 40% on a national basis to less than 10%. So that means 30% less crime. Now, when you've got 30% less crime, that means that the police can start engaging in things like concentrating on things like theft because other crime is diminished dramatically. You see, what's actually happening at the moment with the Labour Party is that they're letting prisoners out earlier. So instead of serving at least 50% of your sentence, they're now saying it's at least 40% of your sentence. So there's thousands of people that are being let out earlier. But what are they being let out to? In many cases, they're just being let out onto the streets, and so they reoffend. So we've got so many cases waiting to go to court that we decided that we're going to get rid of jury trials for any what they've actually said is for any sentences that are expected to be 3 years or less, which is to me complete nonsense. What do you mean expected to be 3 years or less? I mean, you know, it's like that's very, very badly defined. I mean, if it was a maximum sentence of 3 years or less, then you know exactly what you're talking about. But they haven't said that. They've said expected to be 3 years or less. So who knows? I mean, there could be a case where a maximum sentence could be 10 years, but be expected to be 3 years or less. So there will be no jury trial. I mean, so what the Labour Party are doing is basically riding roughshod off the whole criminal system and making matters far worse by a ridiculous policy rather than actually taking the correct policy and the correct action. And we now have a situation where crime is getting out of hand. And like you say, the more they get into a situation where crime is getting out of hand, we now have got no police in order to take action against theft, where the theft is just a mobile phone or just taking alcohol from a shop. I mean, you can take alcohol from a shop and steal it, and we haven't got the police resources to deal with that, so we won't bother to deal with that. And you then get a situation where, of course, lawlessness becomes rife, and that's what's happening now under Labour. They've completely lost control of the criminal system.
And many other systems. Let's go from one planet Zog to another planet Zog over the pond, but to Canada. And Elon Musk agrees with that statement. He says Canada is cooked. And I think he's right. You've got an illustration here with the Gazan Indigenous MP. And she's complaining, and you've seen this on television, I'm sure, at a press conference about the general Liberal Party position, and she wants it changed because she wants and she identifies, get this, Sid, as MMIW2SLGBTQQIA. And can I translate that for you? It stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls and Two Spirit, Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, Questioning, Intersex and Asexual People. I've run out of letters in the alphabet there. I'm sure it can go on and on. But people who are probably not very well in the brain department have got in these power positions and are affecting many, many people, especially through social media. We're in again peculiar times.
Well, the whole thing is complete nonsense, frankly. But, previously the BBC were telling us there's more than 100 genders. And it's very interesting. One of these genders that you just mentioned then is two spirit. But what is two spirit? It's actually demon possession. It's like, okay, I've got my spirit and I've also got a demon spirit that's inside me. So I've now got two spirits. It's
Yes,
like, instead of actually facing up, so instead of actually facing up to what this is and what we're dealing with, which is frankly things that are evil, we're trying to say, well, we have to accept it. We don't accept this nonsense. The fact is God created man and woman, and God created man and woman to come together in holy matrimony and faithfulness for the sake of children. And that is the truth. And I've spoken that truth on media, on national media. And when you speak that truth, they say, "Oh, no, they can't actually effectively argue against it because it's so obviously true." You know, you just have to look at a man's body and a woman's body to see that they're actually meant to go together to produce a child. And God's plan is that should happen in an atmosphere of commitment and faithfulness. And God's plan is so much better than man's stupid ideas, frankly, that have got no value whatsoever. They only lead people to destruction. And there's been increasing numbers, by the way, increasing numbers of people with gender dysphoria regret. People that have had transsexual surgery to make a man into a woman or to a woman into a man. And a few years later, they say, "What on earth have you done to my body?" You know, because what actually happens when you try and make a man into a woman and a woman into a man is you don't change their sex. What you do is make them infertile. So you take away a man's sexual organs and you make him into a eunuch. Or you take away a woman's sexual organs, and so she becomes completely infertile. That's what actually happens. No one can change sex.
yes, you're a brave man, Sid, because there's a lot of politicians that would not say that. We have reached times whereby if you're a minority and literally have your own agenda, you can say to people, well, I can tell you how wrong you are, but you can't tell me how wrong I am. These are dreadful times when we are gagged.
Mm. Well, yes, and it's just this is the thing, you see, because instead of saying, okay, well, we need open debate on this subject. We need to have a proper, responsible discussion on whether people are better off when they've had transsexual surgery, particularly. By the way, we were talking to you earlier about the Tavistock Clinic. You see, the really insidious thing is when they're doing this surgery on children because they can never recover. I mean, if someone aged 30 has transsexual surgery, I mean, that's bad enough. But, they're old enough in order to make a decision. And by the way, they had a case in Belgium where there was somebody in their 40s that had transsexual surgery. It didn't go very well, so he then said he wanted to be killed under the assisted dying law, and they actually killed him. That's the result of your transsexual surgery on a 40-year-old man. I mean, the whole thing is complete. It's terrible. But when they do it on children, that's what's really bad. And what we should be doing is to have a proper, responsible debate where Christians can argue this is how God made us and this is how we should be and this is the right way forward. And New Age people that say, oh no, we've got to respect the rights of transsexuals, that people think they're born in the wrong body, you know, and let's listen to their story. Let's listen to what they've got to say and let's debate it. But instead of actually saying, oh, let's debate it, they say, oh no, anyone who disagrees with us must be silenced. They must be criminal. We've got to have and conversion therapy laws so that anybody that disagrees with us can be arrested and put in prison and silenced. That is what is evil. Evil.
Well, how do we stop this going on? I mean, these strange laws, some people say, come from the very pit of hell.
Well,
Is that
yeah.
true?
Well, yes. Well, you see, but the weapon God has given to us is our voice, which is what I'm doing now, which is basically what we're saying now. This is the weapon to speak against it, and we should speak against it at every opportunity. And if they, thank God for things like core issues trust. I mean, core issues trust are brilliant. X out loud. People who says I used to be homosexual, but I'm not homosexual anymore because I'm now a Christian and God has taken away all the homosexual feelings from me. And this is my experience. And there's loads of them. And thank God for Matthew Gretsch. I mean, if people don't know his story, he was somebody who was on a radio station in Malta talking about his experience, which he used to be homosexual. He became a Christian and lost all the homosexual feelings, and they were discussing it with him. And somebody took offence to what he said. He was then arrested and charged, and it's taken him 3 years to clear his name in a court in Malta. But ultimately, after 3 years, the court in Malta has said you're perfectly entitled to share your testimony and your Christian beliefs, and no one can stop you. That is now the position. So the conversion therapy laws in Malta have basically been proved in court to be of no value whatsoever. And that, by the way, is why, despite it being announced in the last two King's speeches that they're going to introduce conversion therapy laws in the UK, they've not been able to because the whole idea and the whole concept is complete nonsense.
Yes, let's have another topic of considerable debate. Has been in the past and it's come back again, and that's the gypsy problem. And in Hertfordshire, in particular, a whole village has been transformed. Village of 1,300 inhabitants. And suddenly, diggers and excavators turn up to this field that was left a little guarded with concrete slabs, I understand. That's what they need the diggers and excavators for. Get these out of the way. And they are possessing, and it's a very tenuous agreement, something of their own land hundreds of years ago. Well, that's for the courts to decide, but they barged their way in, transformed the village, an awful lot of them. And this is, we can hold responsible to a couple of acts of parliament, as usual. One is the 2010 Freedom Act, and there was another one in 1998. It doesn't include a get out of jail card free for the hippie generation. They're not regarded as gypsies, Romanies. And they seem to get round the law. Whereas if you want to extend your garden shed 2 inches, you'll have the planners down on you as quick as you can imagine. But these people go in there, and it's been estimated in the past about 100,000 of these gypsies exist in the United Kingdom. Can I tell you that's wrong? The figures are more like 300,000. So it's a big community who want, and in a free country, to maintain their lifestyle. Okay, but you can maintain it peaceably without causing havoc, Sid.
Yes, I have to confess, I have a soft spot for the gypsies because I know some of them, and some of them are actually close friends. And there's an amazing number of Christians in the gypsy community. And it's quite interesting what you've just said. Sounds to me very biblical because the biblical position is that after 50 years, in the Jubilee year, all the land should return to the people who had it originally. So if you're saying that the gypsies are now claiming back land which they had originally, then that sounds to me quite biblical. But obviously, things should be done correctly and things should be done according to the law. But the fear of the gypsy community, I think, is something which is wrong and irrational. And what we should happen is proper, sensible negotiations with these people to provide for them in the way they need to be provided for, so they can get what they need and what they want, and not to sort of treat them as outcasts and people that we don't talk to and we just try and get rid of. That is not the right approach.
Is the answer to get a caravan club situation for the gypsies, that they're given a dozen sites throughout the country and they can move freely between those sites?
Well, yes, I mean it's where I've got some friends in London. They're actually got it on a site in Stratford, and it's a purpose-built site for the gypsies. All the caravans on that site, all the sites are fully occupied, and the community are very happy there, I believe. So it's a good idea to have a purpose-built site, and they have to comply with the law, and they do comply with the law.
Would that mean they have to pay rates for their schooling and other things?
Well, yes.
Does
Yes.
that happen at the moment?
Well, yes, it does. Yes, they do. They have to pay for the site. Yeah, there's a cost involved. But the facilities are there and they're happy.
Yeah, I can see you sitting now in a gypsy caravan pulled by a horse, trailing around the country. Hey, it might be a good idea. Never mind these buses that the politicians have. This could be an opening for you, Sid.
Well, I must admit, I am very attracted by the simple lifestyle. See, I was very inspired by Mother Teresa when she came back from India with her two carrier bags. And she said, "These are my life's possessions. I have one habit which I wear, and I have one which is dirty, which I'm waiting to wash, and I've got just a few other possessions, and that's all I go through life with." And I think, well, how wonderful. And I've tried, and when I've been to America, when I used to go to America on my own, which obviously was in a period from sort of like 2002 to 2015, but when I got remarried. But in that period, I always used to travel to America with just a rucksack and nothing else, and I sometimes go for 3 weeks. And it's quite funny, really, because I'd arrive at the airport and they say, "Oh, don't forget your luggage, sir." And I said, "No, this is my luggage. It's all in the rucksack here." And they'd be like, "Come aside, come aside. Where are you going? How much money have you got?" I said, "I'm a financial advisor." I'm like, "Oh, really? You're a financial advisor? Well, tell me, give me some financial advice to the United States." I said, "Well, your main problem is you're too much in ad hoc to China. You've been spending too much, and you're now in massive debt to China." But I said, "If you want me to give you advice," and I started giving them, "Oh yeah, okay, okay, go. Oh, off you go, off you go."
Yes, how to deal with the enemy. Right.
That that actually happened to me at the border with the United States because I was traveling light. But I love the idea of traveling light. I think it's a good thing. And the gypsies, they only have their caravans, so they travel light through life, and God bless them.
Gypsy Kings spring into mind. We move on to another interesting position. We'll call it the woke mission. Things have died down since the visit to the moon, the far side of the moon, with Artemis crew. But all the way through, things are coming now to light, are emerging. What was that mission about? Well, in the scientific sense, of course, it was seeing that we could put a base to the far side of the moon, exploit the ice that's down there on the South Pole, and having it as a staging post to Mars. Good idea. But my goodness me, the wokies have got into this mission big time, even to the makeup of the crew. Quote, representing, said NASA, all humanity. That's why you had a woman. That's why you had the first black man. That's why you had the first non-American. So it's all been carefully planned around this for astronauts to quote, share deeply moving reflections on their shared humanity. And if you saw the after flight when they were rescued and taken back to the centre, um, how did you and what did you experience on your 10-day journey? It's been 50 years since the last one. And boy, were they effusive. And it was all about shared humanity. How things have changed, Sid. Because let's go back to the early days of Apollo, and quite a few people had really phenomenal spiritual experiences. And some came back indeed as Christians. They saw the beauty of Earth just hanging there in blackness, the stars round. Wow, that changed their life completely. And they shared that value with us. Well, what has happened in 50 years? Well, it's all part of what actually has happened, isn't it? Humanism.
Well, yeah, but it's interesting. There was at least one of those people you mentioned who actually said, I'm not religious at all. I'm an atheist, but all I could do was think about God and think about, that God has created all this. And he's basically, like you say, came back a Christian. And that was actually happened on this last trip. So they may try and present it as, oh, we're now completely humanist, we're not Christians anymore. But the reality of what they actually faced when they're out there was actually seeing something of the glory of God. I mean, it is real, it's absolutely real, and you're quite right. Just about all the astronauts that have been out into space have come back and talked about God.
There you go. From the sublime to ridiculous, if you wish. Um, Women's football. Oh, the ladies are in trouble again. What's happened? Well, they see these big stadiums that they can't use, and they want one of their own next to the big stadium. Brighton have gone ahead with this, but they would, wouldn't they? They're seeking permission to have their own stadium. And people are saying, well, hang on a little bit. What is the average attendance to the women's game? Well, it's 2,000. Well, wait a minute. We're subsidising you, say the main big clubs, the Manchester Uniteds, the Chelseas, the Arsenals, with viable, inverted commas, women's teams. They say we're subsidising you like mad already, but there's no way in any business plan that you could possibly make a case with 2,000 people on average. The big games attract more than that, but they're few and far between. Is this feminism again, Sid, creeping into sport?
Well, the answer, frankly, is yes. I mean, but my experience is a bit tragic, really, because my club, Reading, had a team in the Women's Premiership, and the owner of the Reading Football Club decided that he could no longer finance them. So he literally stopped financing them altogether. And the club had to go right down to from the first tier or the second tier, right down to the sixth tier, I think is, or the fifth tier is where they are now. and start the club again. And it's because the owner decided he wasn't going to fund them, and that's when it came home to me how much actually women's football is subsidised by the club, by men's football in effect. So absolutely, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you're being subsidised heavily by men's football, you've got absolutely no right whatsoever to demand your own stadium. There's nothing wrong, by the way. The Reading women's team now use Slough Stadium, which is a non-league team, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I mean, you don't have to have a stadium right next to the main football stadium if you don't have enough attendance to use that. I mean, it's the idea that you need to build new stadium for women's football, frankly, is nonsense.
You like women's football, Sid?
I'm quite happy to watch it. I mean, I wouldn't say that I prefer men's football, but I mean, I'm quite happy to watch women's football.
Rugby as well, can I say?
Women's rugby, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's women. The England women's team have been very successful at women's rugby. Yeah, I'm quite happy to watch it. I mean, I prefer men's rugby. I mean, be honest, but I'm quite happy to watch women's rugby. I wouldn't say, oh, I'm not going to watch that. I think what's insidious is when they allow a man to play in the women's team. I mean, that's when it becomes a complete disaster. And I certainly wouldn't watch women's rugby if there was a man playing in one of the women's teams.
You can tell he's a politician, doesn't answer the question. But I'm going to get him on this
I did
next one.
answer the question. I said, yes, I would watch it.
That's all right then. We move on to my favourite subject and Sid's least favourite subject, but I've got him this weekend, and it's the dreaded VAR. It's changed the whole championship. Feel sorry for West Ham, elated for Arsenal, but on a decision. Another crazy VAR decision that never should have happened. I mean, look, Sid, when you say, oh, we'll go back and see if a foul was committed, do you go back 30 seconds, 1 minute, 45 minutes to see if on the way to that disputed goal there was a foul? It's got out of hand.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I watched the match, and frankly, there is no question that the goalkeeper would have caught that ball if there hadn't been a West Ham player that literally had his arm right across him and forced him to the ground. And quite honestly, if you're saying that players should be allowed to force a goalkeeper to the ground, prevent them from catching the ball so that a goal can be scored, I mean, that's obviously wrong. The referee didn't see it, so he gave the goal. VAR did look at it, and the goal was overturned. That was absolutely the right decision. And frankly, if that goal had been given, it would have been completely and utterly wrong.
Therefore, we've got to change the rules, haven't we? With corner taking and packed 6 yard boxes and about physical intervention.
Well, yeah, may well be. I mean, there was another incident, by the way, in that clip where you saw Declan Rice, who was basically hugging a West Ham player to prevent them from getting into the action. I mean, the referee could have looked at that and said, "No, that was a foul." But the thing is, that was taking place a long way from the ball. What actually happened with the foul, the West Ham player and the goalkeeper was when the ball was there. And so basically, he literally, as I say, stopped the Arsenal goalkeeper from catching the ball. I mean, you can't allow that to happen. I'm sorry.
Is this part of getting rid of the bully boys in football? Because there are certain teams, Sid, that are bully boys. And yeah, physically, they may have got big strapping males there and they use their physical strength. Should the football associations, plural, come down on this a bit more rigidly? Brawn will beat brain, and that's why they do it. Pack defences and use their physical strength. Is there any way of controlling it?
Well, the obvious result is going to be yellow cards and red cards. And there have been in this season an awful lot of red cards, frankly. I mean, it's not that unusual just to have teams playing with 10 men and sometimes even with 9 men because two players have been sent off. But I guess if the authorities said, right, we're going to stamp this out, we're going to have more yellow and red cards issued, where there is blatant physical, what are professional fouls, frankly. You see, they have a situation now that if there's a professional foul where somebody has a goal scoring opportunity, they have to be sent off. Well, professional fouls shouldn't happen at all anywhere in the pitch, frankly, but they do. And sometimes people say, oh, well, they took a yellow card for the team because there was obviously a threat of a goal. Well, that shouldn't be happening. So, yeah, they should clamp down on it. And there is a way they can, and they should use that method.
Well, for once, we agree on the footy section.
Except the VAR.
Yeah. That's it, Sid. Thank you so much. We'll see you very shortly.
Thank you.